welcome to this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports entertainment all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith, but you might as well call us all Jerry Maguire because it is time for Show Me the Money Lines, where we take a look at some of the weekend's NFL money lines and give you our betting picks. We begin on Sunday afternoon, where the Baltimore Ravens meet the Kansas City Chiefs in a battle of the unbeatens. Rick, which team comes away with a win in this contest?
You know, I'll keep it short and sweet. It's going to be the Chiefs at home. I like what Baltimore's done so far, but come on now. They've done it against the Dolphins and the Cardinals. It's not like they've beat teams that are even going to be close to having a 500 record, let alone a winning team. I like the Chiefs here at home, even though there is one concern, though. You know, they might beat down LaShawn McCoy and Damian Williams. They're both suffering injuries and not practicing much this week. So that could change the outcome of the game. And the Chiefs defense, you know, to me, they're still up and down. That first half against the Raiders, or at least the first quarter, they look like the Chiefs defense from last year. They were able to play better the rest of the game. Baltimore comes in with a smash mouth offense. I'd like to see how Kansas City's defense responds to that. I think the Ravens will try and control the clock. But the Chiefs have to win here. They're at home. They usually win their home games. You have to go with the Chiefs. But I'm not confident in, their performance this weekend.
Yeah, I can't bet against Kansas City at home. Like you said, the Ravens have played maybe the two worst teams in their respective conferences. So while being 2-0 is nice, I don't think anyone expected them to not be 2-0 at this point. So, you know, they're going on the road into one of the toughest venues in which to play for a road team. So I can't bet against Mahomes, even if they don't have two of their top running backs. I think they should still be able to get the job done. Obviously, it's their toughest test yet. It should be a good game, probably one of the better games of the week, but I can't really reasonably pick against Kansas City right now.
I do think this will be a good game to determine how good Baltimore might actually be this season, to see how legitimate of a contender they're going to be. But they're not going to win the game. The Chiefs are a Super Bowl contender. We know that. They're going to be the home team. That's going to be a huge benefit. It's got to be Kansas City if you're going to place a wager on this one. Also on Sunday afternoon, the Atlanta Falcons look to build off of their win over Philadelphia in Week 2. They were visiting the 1-1 Indianapolis Colts. Taylor, where are you going with?
Atlanta's been really reckless with the ball. Matt Ryan has 5 turnovers already. If he keeps coughing it up, obviously he's going to be in trouble again this week. The Colts could easily be 2-0 if they've just gotten a few breaks in LA in Week 1 against the Chargers. I think the Colts are going to win this game. It's one of the tougher games to pick of the week. I would not be surprised with either outcome, but they're at home. They're a slight favorite. Jacoby Brissett has looked pretty good through the first 2 weeks. So, Atlanta winning obviously wouldn't be a huge shock, but I'm going to take Indy at home.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those toss-up games right now. The Colts have played better than people expected them to. They had a chance of being 2-0 coming into this game. They lost to the Chargers opening week in overtime. They played solid football on the road against the Chargers. Now they're back home against a team that's been inconsistent on offense. Not only that, I think Atlanta got a little bit lucky against the Eagles when the Eagles lost their 2 top receivers. Really even, made a run to come back late in the game, gave up that late touchdown to Julio Jones. With that said, I'm not confident in the Colts yet. I'm not feeling like I can just say, yes, I'm going to take the Colts to win at home. They're at home. Atlanta's a bad team. I'm taking Colts. I think if there's going to be a chance for Matt Ryan to say, you know what, enough's enough of this inconsistency of not living up to the expectations coming into the season, this will be the weekend to do it. Going on the road, being an underdog against a team that doesn't even have their franchise quarterback anymore, you have to think, hey, listen, this is kind of a slight disrespect that people think we're going to lose to this team. I'm actually finding myself leaning towards the Falcons here. I think their duo of Ridley and Julio Jones is going to be a nightmare matchup for the Colts secondary. Their all-pro linebackers banged up. I'm not sure Brissett is going to be able to perform at a consistently above average level. I'm taking the Falcons to cut spread and most likely win the game outright.
I'm going to side with Rick on this one. I think Atlanta's going to come away with the win. I know that Indianapolis has been surprisingly good this season after Andrew Luck's retirement. Basically, the expectations for them plummeted as soon as Luck decided that he wasn't playing any longer. And they've shown that they still had a good team that was built around him and now built around the guys who were still left behind. I've got to say Atlanta, though, I know that you could say it was a lucky win. You could say that they had against the Eagles, but they had to put themselves in a position to be in that spot to win. The Eagles are a good team. I'm more on board with Atlanta being a legitimate at this point and being a threat than I am Indy. In a couple of weeks' time, that might very much change, but I've got to go with Atlanta until I can be more confident that the Colts are for real, that they're not just off to a weird start and the rest of the season is still to come. Let's move to the Sunday Night Football game from Week 3 as the undefeated Los Angeles Rams visit the Cleveland Browns. Rick, who picks up the W and pays out this week? Is it going to be Taylor's Browns?
No. You know what? Listen, if the Jets had Darnold, they would have won that game. I don't like anything about Cleveland right now. And they just lost their tight end for at least the next 4 to 6 weeks with a wrist injury. That's one more weapon they're going to be down. The Rams, we know they have that high-powered offense, but it's been their defense that has been the catalyst each week. They put the hammer down on the Saints. Teddy Bridgewater was supposed to be the best backup in the league, and actually they had him ranked higher than some of the starting quarterbacks in the league. He comes in, the Rams just demolish him and make him look like he was a third-string quarterback and not a highly touted backup. And then it went to Carolina the first week and held that offense in check. The Rams' defense has been surprisingly good. Cleveland's offense has not been that good. Other than that long touchdown pass to Odell Beckham on Monday night, like the Jets kept that game close, and they didn't even have a quarterback, and the offensive line played terrible. I don't see the Browns winning this game, and I don't even see the Browns covering the spread. I think the Rams are going to pull away late. I think, it'll be close at first, the crowd, the energy, all that. But in the end, the Rams' talent is going to be evident compared to the Browns' talent, and the Rams will win the game and cover the spread.
Yeah, I don't see how you pick against the Rams, even if they're on the road. Rick said everything needs to be said, I guess. The Browns beat the Jets last week with the third-string quarterback, not very impressive. Despite going on the road, the Rams defense shredded the Saints offensive line last week. I think Bridgewater's weak performance had more to do with that than his actual poor quarterback play. And I would expect the Rams to keep doing that. The offense is going to come around at some point. It may as well be this week on the road. So, again, I don't see how you can pick against LA.
Yeah, I'm going to make that one unanimous because the Rams are the Rams and the Browns are the Browns. It's easy enough. This one, I think, is probably the most obvious of the three. I think it's easier to make a case for Baltimore against Kansas City than it is to make a case for the Browns with what they've done to this point against the Rams. 12 weeks from now might be different. It won't be, but it technically could be. But this is week 3. The Browns have played like they have. They've played like the Browns, and I'm not picking them against the LA Rams. Lots of quarterback changes for week 3. We just touched on it briefly in that last question. Either due to injuries or benchings, we've got a number of changes. So let's do a couple of daily fantasy picks. On the benching front, the New York Giants have decided to bench Eli Manning in order to kickstart the Daniel Jones era. They'll visit 1-1 Tampa Bay this weekend, while Cam Newton may not be able to start this week for Carolina, which would mean it's Kyle Allen against Kyler Murray in the Cardinals versus Panthers game. Those two, of course, battled for the QB job at Texas A&M, which Allen won. Meanwhile, the New York Jets lost backup quarterback Trevor Siemian for the season on Monday night. Sam Darnold out for at least another couple of weeks with mono. That means Luke Falk will be expected to make his first career start as the Jets visit the New England Patriots. Talk about being thrown to the wolves, getting your first start against the Pats. Taylor, of Luke Falk, Kyle Allen, and Daniel Jones, which makes for the most intriguing fantasy football play as we sit here late Thursday morning?
The answer is none of them, but I guess if you have to pick one, it would be not Luke Falk since he's facing New England. Kyle Allen and Daniel Jones are both going on the road, but they're both facing potentially weak defenses. Daniel Jones against Tampa Bay. Kyle Allen against Arizona. Tampa Bay has looked okay on that side of the ball, but I still think they're probably going to grade out below average on a long-term basis. I think Jones is obviously the more talented of the two, so I'm leaning in his direction. I like his weaponry with Saquon, of course, and Evan Ingram, guys like that. I think he's more likely to throw the ball downfield, whereas I think Carolina may actually just give the ball to Christian McCaffrey the entire time. And there's a wind gust blowing in here with my curtain coming all over me here. But
what are you, Chicago? It's the Windy City. What's going on?
A nice ocean breeze has made its way to the show.
Yes.
Jones.
I'll pick up where Taylor left off because he was interrupted by Mother Nature there. When you look at all three, I like Luke Falk in college more than the other two. He was a solid quarterback for Washington State, replaced by the stash who's now starting in Jacksonville. With that said, in the preseason, Daniel Jones looked the best out of all of them. Allen did not look good, and there was even some question marks whether or not he was going to be the backup quarterback in Carolina. Falk going on the road to the Patriots, I mean, come on now. Like, you can't have a more difficult task at hand, especially when you're not even bringing your full complementary, full arsenal. They're going to be down a few weapons, especially on defense, if Mosley doesn't play at linebacker. And we saw what that can do to that defense. That he's the heart and soul. You go into New England with that offense, Tom Brady, they can run, they can throw, they can do whatever they want. You don't have your best defensive player, forget about it. They're done. I think Arizona is actually going to beat Carolina without Cam Newton. And then because look how well they played against Baltimore last week, and they got the tie against Detroit in the first week, which they came back, they showed some heart. You have to go with Jones here. He looked the best in the preseason out of all of them. They drafted him for this, even though they're doing Eli dirty right now because he did not look bad. The rest of the team looked bad. Jones is in the same position. There's no receivers to throw the ball to. Shepard's probably not going to play. Golden Tate's still out. They have Ingram and Barkley. If the defense just focuses on those two like Buffalo did and Dallas did, Jones is going to have the same issues. The only chance he has to succeed more is running the ball, is scrambling. Because Eli, he's like a statue back there. He can't scramble. He was getting pulled down from behind, trying to run for his life in the game last weekend. You got to go Jones here. The other two aren't even close right now.
Yeah, I was trying to come up with a case to make for Kyle Allen, but it's because, I mean, he is going up against Arizona, which is a plus, but it's really hard to do that. Daniel Jones, yes, the Giants are not bringing everybody for him for his first start as far as targets go, but he still has Saquon Barkley. He still has a couple of targets that are probably better than anything that the other two are going to be working with. I'm with you guys. Luke Falk is an immediate write-off. He's playing for the Jets, and they're playing against the Patriots, and they're playing in New England. So that's just yet no on that one. But it's got to be Daniel Jones because he's got – I think it's more likely – you've also got technically a possibility, I believe still at last check, that Cam Newton could play. But – so, I mean, it's if you're making your lineup today for Sunday, then I guess Jones would be the better choice, the more reasonable choice, just because you know that he's going to play. I do think he's got more targets.
Running back in football.
What's that?
He's the best running back in football, too. I mean, he's
right.
Positioned more to succeed than Allen on the road and Falk on the road.
Yeah, I agree with you. Daniel Jones has to be the choice here. Ben Roethlisberger's out for the season in Pittsburgh, leaving Mason Rudolph to step in for the Steelers against the 2-0 San Francisco 49ers this week. And with Drew Brees out for New Orleans, Teddy Bridgewater appears to be in line for the start for the Saints as they visit the 2-0 Seattle Seahawks, though head coach Sean Payton won't say which quarterback will lead the charge on Sunday, making Seattle prepare for Bridgewater and Taysom Hill. Rick, technically you've got three options here as well. Which quarterback has the most upside this week?
Oh, it's Rudolph. The Saints on the road at Seattle is one of the hardest places to play, let alone Bridgewater looked terrible last week against the Rams. The Saints defense is not playing well at all. They're giving up a lot of points and a lot of yards. to the Rams offense, to the Texans offense. Now they're going to play against Seattle, who has a strong running game, a renewed passing attack with rookie Metcalf stretching the field and winning the one-on-one battles, and then Lockett as a possession receiver. That line's holding up. Russell Wilson's looking good. I don't trust the Saints. I like Hill for the Saints. I think he's a fun player to watch, but he's not as good of a passer as Bridgewater or Rudolph. Rudolph was a stud in college. He led the nation in passing for Oklahoma State his last year there. He looked good coming in last weekend against Seattle. He brought Pittsburgh back in that game. And although they fell short at the end, he had a confidence. The team perked up. The team believes in him. If they didn't believe in him, they wouldn't trade a first-round pick to go get Fitzpatrick from the Dolphins to add to that defense. You don't trade a first-round pick next year for a defender if you think your team's not going to do well with the replacement quarterback. I think Rudolph's going to has the best upside. I'm not sold on the 49ers. I know they're 2-0, but they beat the Bengals, and I don't even remember who they beat in week 1 because it was meaningless. Because to me, the Niners are irrelevant. With that said, it's got to be Rudolph.
Yeah, they beat the Buccaneers the week before then, I think. Yeah, it's Rudolph. I think their scheme also kind of plays it up a little bit. Roethlisberger led the league in passing yards last year, so they shouldn't throw it as much necessarily, but I still think they trust Rudolph enough to let him kind of open up the playbook a little bit and throw the deep ball. Plus, like you said, going on the road to Seattle is about the toughest place you can possibly play, even if they're not the Legion of Boom anymore. They're still a solid defense. It's still a loud place to play, especially for a guy that's not super experienced, especially over the last couple of years in Bridgewater. So Rudolph on the road against the Niners. San Francisco has looked pretty good, but it's more of a matchup type thing, and I just kind of trust Rudolph with his weapons more. And the Saints can kind of just give the ball to Alvin Kamara and let him do his thing. So I think Pittsburgh is more likely to air it out, and that's obviously what you want. So I'll take Rudolph.
Yeah, I mentioned being thrown to the wolves for the Jets, putting their quarterback Falcon to go to New England to play the Patriots for his first start of the year. Bridgewater getting his first start of the year and having to go into Seattle might be a close NFC, version of that. That's going to be a really difficult thing. It's got to be Rudolph. I think that he's got good weapons around him that he might be able to use. I liked him in college. I think that he's going to San Francisco. He's got a better matchup. Going to go with Mason Rudolph. Unanimous across the board on that one as well. Let's move to a segment that we're calling Picking Favorites, where we look at the games involving our favorite teams. All three of us have made picks for all three of these games, which we're going to show you in just a minute, but we'll each have to break down our personal favorite NFL team's game and pick a winner before we move on to the next game. For me, that's the Miami Dolphins, and they're once again major underdogs, 21.5 points this week as they visit the 2-0 Dallas Cowboys. That last part, the 2-0 Dallas Cowboys, kind of irrelevant here. The Dolphins, I said a week ago when they were something like 18 or 19-point underdogs at home against New England, I said I'd give up 24, 28 points. If the house is willing to give you better odds, better payout on that, do it. I wouldn't go quite that high this week, but I would still take the Cowboys minus 21.5. I still think that the Dolphins are going to lose by probably 4 scores, maybe 4 touchdowns, but I'd say probably 24 to 25 probably 24.5 would be a line that might frighten me a little bit. 23.5 would be cool with me. The Dolphins are terrible. They're not beating Dallas, especially not in Dallas. They were outscored 110 to -5 in their first 2 home games. They're not going to score more points than that when they go to Jerry World in Dallas. Taylor's favorite team also playing in the state of Texas. That's the Houston Texans. They are the underdogs on Sundays. They visit the LA Chargers. Both favored by 3.5 points for this one, with both teams sitting at 1-1. Taylor, break it down for us and give us your pick.
I think this is a pretty evenly matched game. Both offenses look pretty decent. The Chargers haven't really missed Melvin Gordon a ton, but last week they kind of looked a little bit more shaky in Detroit. Houston can air it out as long as they can protect Deshaun Watson, which is still a big TBD at this point. He's been sacked plenty of times through the first 2 weeks. I think 8 games in a row he's been sacked at least 4 times or something like that. So they're going to have to work on protecting him. I'm not super confident they can, but I think it'll be a high-scoring game. The Chargers at home don't really have a huge home field advantage. They play in a tiny soccer stadium. I expect plenty of Texans to be making their way out here to California for that game. It's going to be loud, for both teams offensively. So not much of a home field advantage. I'm being a homer here. I think the game is a toss-up, and I'll just take the points, and I'll take the Texans to just win the game outright, I guess.
Finally, for Rick, his favorite would be the 2-0 Buffalo Bills, who host the 0-2 Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday. Bills favored by 6 points in that contest. Rick, will the Bills continue to build up their fans' hopes with another win over another terrible team, or will they come back down to earth a little bit this week?
Listen, the Bengals have given Buffalo fits over the last couple of years. The one receiver that Trey White has had the most difficult time guarding is A.J. Green, and guess what? He's not playing. There is no chance the Bengals have it winning this game. Their offensive line is shambles. Their defense looks poor. They can score a lot of points. However, last weekend when they're at home against the Niners, and they look like the Dolphins, for lack of better comparisons. They look bad. Now they go on the road to Buffalo. This is Buffalo's home opener on the season. Keep in mind, even though they beat the Giants and Jets, they did both of those on the road. When they were an underdog to the Jets in the first week, and everybody picked the Jets, except for me and the diehard Bills fans, picked the Jets to win. They went in there and smashed the Jets in the face. So let's not discount that. Now they go home. They might not have Singletary. He's got a bum hamstring, but that's okay. They still got Frank Gore. They still got T.J. Yeldon. Josh Allen really improved from the first week to the second week. That defense is just getting going. It's like a big steam engine. It just takes a little time to get going, get warmed up, and once it does, they plow right through you. I don't see the Bengals having any chance of even covering that spread. I think Buffalo's going to win double digits. I said before the season started they were going to start off 3-0 because I didn't think either of those three teams could beat Buffalo. I still don't think the Bengals have any shot. I'm taking my Bills at home. I think they're going to win, 27-13.
Three prop bets for the NFL to go over now, all having to do with AFC East teams. BetOnline has prop bets available about the Miami Dolphins going 0-16 this season, as well as the New England Patriots going 16-0. In both cases, the yes pays out at plus 500, the no at minus 1,000. There's also an option to bet on the Patriots going 19-0 and winning the Super Bowl, paying out at plus 1,000 for yes, minus 2,000 for no. Taylor, which of the 16-game wagers is more likely to pay off as a yes? And would you consider taking New England to go 19-0 at those odds?
It has to be the Dolphins, just because they've looked completely hapless, obviously, through the first two games. New England's looked great, on the other hand, but one of the games was against the Dolphins, so you kind of take that with a grain of salt. Plus, they do have a pretty tough stretch schedule. Weeks 11 through 14, they'll face Philly, Dallas, Houston, and Kansas City. I don't really love their chances of going through that stretch undefeated. So Miami's horrible. Sam Darnold should be back by the time they face the Jets for the first time in week 9. So they don't even get the Luke Falk experience between now and then. So it's tough to look at their schedule and find any wins. I think the Dolphins at the same odds are a much better bet. I would consider the plus 1,000 on 19-0, but like I said, I really don't like them to go 16-0, so I'm not really loving the slightly better odds on a 19-0 finish.
I acknowledge your argument. I think you have valid points, but I'm leaning towards the Patriots going 16-0. Philly is inconsistent. New England has showed that their defense is better than what people thought they were going to be. What they did in week 1 against Pittsburgh, they flat out embarrassed them. And then they did what was expected against Miami and completely blow them out. But they scored 2 defensive touchdowns. Collins returning, the secondary looking as strong as any secondary in the AFC. This is why I can't go with the Dolphins to go win this, even though I think there's a good chance because they're just not good. And I'm sorry, Drew. It pains me to say that while you're watching. If you weren't here, I would say it all day long, no problem. But
Sure.
the Dolphins play the Jets twice, they play the Giants, and they play Washington. They have a shot of winning one of those 4 games. More than I think the Patriots have a shot at losing. The only team I think that can beat the Patriots will be the Chiefs. But guess what? It's on the road in New England. They always seem to get the most difficult regular season games at home, and that gives them that slight advantage, that slight edge. Typically, New England starts off a little slow, and then, by week 6 to 8, they start ramping it up. They make their adjustments, and then they run the table. This year, they've come out of the gate looking like they're the best team, and they brought that piece of garbage, Antonio Brown, onto the team, and he just makes that offense unstoppable. You can't guard those 3 receivers one-on-one unless you have 3 elite cornerbacks. And last I checked, there's really nobody in the NFL that has 3 elite cornerbacks. Sorry. No, it's the Patriots. They have a better shot going 16-0. I won't say 19-0 because playoffs, anything can happen, especially playing the Chiefs in the playoffs. So, and who knows? Baltimore has been kryptonite for New England a couple times in the postseason. They have the defense in the running game to smash them. We'll see. But I think Patriots 16-0, slightly better chance than the Dolphins going 0-16.
I don't know that either of these would happen. I don't in my heart of hearts, I don't think either will. I could see New England winning 14, maybe 15. The Dolphins I don't know where that win's going to come from, but there are so many terrible teams over the last number of years that find one. When they play the Jets twice, and they do play the Bills twice, and the Bills are not in that category by any means, but those tend to be kind of tighter games than they have any right being, regardless of which team is up and which team is down. I just feel that the Dolphins are going to sneak one in there. That said, I think it's more likely the Dolphins go winless because we have seen 0-16 teams in the last 10 years in the NFL. It's been, other than the Patriots, the 18-1 Patriots that got caught cheating in their game against the Jets, that the NFL didn't force them to forfeit that game, even though their coaching staff was caught cheating in that game for the entirety of that game immediately following that game. I digress. The going 16-0 in a regular season, I think, is going to be more difficult than to go 0-16. Even for as good as the Patriots are, we have seen when teams like a Detroit Lions or Cleveland Browns are truly pitiful, that going 0-16 is possible. The Patriots have had amazing teams over the years that have not gone 16-0. The Patriots have had the best team in the NFL from start to finish and have not gone 16-0 in most of those years. I think it's much more likely the Dolphins end up 0-16 than the Patriots end up 16-0 for that reason. But I think it's more likely New England's 14-2 and the Dolphins are 1-15. If these odds are still available after the first Dolphins-Jets game and the Dolphins lose by 2 touchdowns or more to the Jets, then I'd take the Dolphins 0-16. That would be my tipping point on it. I don't mind a flyer on the Dolphins to go 0-16, though, because they are truly historically bad. Jumping over to college football with a segment that we're calling Whose Season is Over. We're entering week 4, and some teams with big postseason hopes are already standing on thin ice. Taylor and I, along with Jim Baviglia, provide plenty of college football betting picks each and every week in our show Power 5 Picks. So make sure to check that out on the channel or by clicking that little info button that should be on your screen now. Rick, which team or teams jump out as either being done when it comes to postseason potential or could be on the verge of it this weekend?
It has to be Notre Dame. Heading down to Georgia. First of all, I think Georgia's the better team. But second of all, Notre Dame doesn't play in a Power 5 conference. So they have to basically win all their games to be a legitimate playoff contender like they were last year. If they lose to what would probably be one of the 4 playoff teams or maybe one of the top 6 candidates for the 4 spots, it's going to hurt them more than just about anybody. Like Michigan, if Michigan loses, I think they're right behind Notre Dame. Their postseason chances are done. Even if they win out in Big Ten, losing this early to Wisconsin, barely beaten Army, not looking like a powerhouse team that people expected them to look like, their season will be done too. Even you could even say make a case for Wisconsin if they lose. They're posted like anybody who's playing one of these top 25 matchups to get a Final Four spot. You can't lose, especially this early in the season. Like if you're going to lose, it has to be right at the end, like a conference game or the last game of the season where it's against a great team, and you might still have that slight chance like Georgia has done over the last couple of years and sneaks on in there. But at the top of my list, it's Notre Dame. If they lose, their season done, and then right behind them would be Michigan.
I think Texas is done if they lose. They're playing Oklahoma State at home. They already have a loss under the belt. I don't think you can lose 2 games and still make the playoff. Plus, they have Oklahoma in a couple weeks. So, Oklahoma State's the kind of team that can pull these kinds of upsets every year, even on the road. So if Texas loses, I think they're toast. I think Michigan is another obvious candidate. Like Rick was saying, you can't barely beat Army and then lose, even on the road to Wisconsin, which is a good opponent, a tough game. But, that win against Army was really a loss, and I think the committee will view it that way. So if they lose a game to Wisconsin this weekend, I think they really have an uphill climb. I think Washington's probably already out. We were talking before the season about how the Pac-12 is like you have to either go undefeated or have a really good one loss. They don't have a really good one loss, even though it was a weird weather kind of scenario. So even if they do wind up, beating Oregon or something later in the season, it's hard to imagine them really overcoming that. Oregon has a better loss. I think they have a slim chance if they run the table since they lost to Auburn. But, all these teams that we were talking about before the season being very likely playoff contenders are already kind of on the ropes, and it's only September. So I think these teams are kind of on the watch list right now.
I want to just mention one quick thing because I do disagree with Rick on one. I totally agree Notre Dame, if they lose to Georgia, they're not going to have enough on their schedule. I forget if they play Clemson or not, but even there, they're viewed, even though they are like ACC adjacent, they're not viewed as a Power 5 team if they don't go 12-0. So I agree with you on that. Michigan, obvious one. That game against Army was terrible. Where I do disagree is that if you're going to take a loss, you need it to be in one of the first 3 weeks of the season. You've got to win, unless you're an SEC team that gets the special treatment at the end, where you could lose to Alabama, or if you're Auburn, you could lose to Alabama in the last week of the season, not play in the conference championship game, and still be viewed as one of the top 4 teams in the country. That's the only exception. If you're in the other Power 4 conferences, you're not going to get that benefit of the doubt. You've got to get a loss out of the way early, or you have to run the table. If you lose in October, November, you're done. I
think they're all done. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, the only chance someone has at a one loss would be an SEC team. The rest of them have no chance.
So to that point, the 2 teams that I'm going to bring up are the 2 SEC schools that play each other this week, Texas A&M and Auburn. Whichever team loses this game this week is going to be in a position where they're going to lose a tiebreaker to the other. And even if, let's say Auburn beats A&M on the road, great road win, puts them way up there. If they then lose to Bama, let's say Bama loses to LSU, there's no way for Texas A&M to get a spot at that point. If A&M wins, even though it could be a 2-point game or a 3-point game, and Auburn could have gone into one of the tougher facilities to play in as a road team and lost, I still don't think that they're going to be able to get back in because they're going to have to play Bama. And even if they were to beat Bama, A&M owns the tiebreaker to get into the conference championship game. So it's one of those things where the loser of that game, I think that may not be, they may still be somewhere near the top 10, top 15 in the rankings, and they might still be able to climb back to the top 7, but they have no shot at it because they're going to put themselves behind the other and Alabama, and you just can't do that if you're in the SEC West. So those are going to be the 2 teams I'm going to throw into the mix there. Now, I brought this team up last week, so let's talk UCF one more time. The Knights crushed Stanford in week 3, jumping out to a 21-0 lead in the first 7 minutes. They led 38-7 at halftime en route to a 45-27 win over the Cardinal. The win moved UCF up just 2 spots in the AP rankings to number 15. This week, their final game against a Power 5 team this season as they visit Pitt, a team that took Penn State down to the wire just 1 week ago. Rick, there are 13 undefeated teams ahead of UCF as we sit here, plus 1 loss Texas. is there any hope for the Knights to contend for the college football playoff at all this year? Or is this just another situation where the Knights could dominate, run the table 13-0, and be left way on the outside as they have been the last 2 seasons?
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. There's no way they're going to get up there. The only shot they have at climbing up to even the top, let's just say the top 6 or 7, is if you have all those teams ahead of them lose more than one game. Even with one loss, if that one loss comes in conference play to another ranked team, the loser is not going to fall down. Like even if Michigan lost to Wisconsin this week, they're not going to fall below UCF unless they lose a second time. And say Notre Dame can lose this week. They'll still be ahead. Like there's all these teams that'll still be ahead of UCF. UCF is going to win, go undefeated for like 10 straight years, and still not make the playoffs based on the way the system is. What we're seeing here is what's going to end up changing the system again. Like we've had issues in the past with teams and championship games to create this new playoff system we've had over the last couple of years. What we're seeing with UCF, it's going to be another example that's going to lead to another change because 4 teams is just not enough when you don't have the same parity where the Power 5 is weighed heavier than teams that can just run the table year after year after year. We're not talking like this is the first year they've come out of nowhere and they can go undefeated. This will be their 3rd straight year where they have a chance of going undefeated. Unfortunately, they're going to be on the outside looking in because I think even a one-loss Georgia would still get in over them like's happened in the past. I think Big 12 conference winner, Pac-12 conference winner, all those conference winners, even if they have one loss, will still be ahead of UCF. And I don't think UCF did enough against Stanford. They let them score too many points. If they were to keep it a 30 or 40-point blowout, they would have more hype around it. But they let them come back too much. And this weekend against Pitt, Pitt's a solid team. UCF has to go up there and win by at least 3 touchdowns. Like they have to blow everybody out to continue for people to say, well, what about UCF? What about UCF? If they're just winning by a touchdown or a couple points, it's like, well, what about UCF? Like, why does it matter?
Yeah, it should take multiple losses from these teams that actually play good teams. You know, UCF, if your best win is Stanford or Pitt, that's not overly impressive. Stanford is not a good team, as we've seen. Previous years don't really matter, as we've seen with the committee. You know, if you go undefeated for 3 years, I don't think they really care about that. UCF's schedule has nobody on it. I think these teams that actually play other good teams should be ahead of them. If you're playing UConn and Cincinnati and East Carolina, that's just not impressive. So, they tried to schedule Stanford. They maybe thought Stanford would be good. They're not. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality. It's just the way the system is set up. I do think this could, like Rick was saying, wind up causing the field to expand down the line. But as it stands now, I don't really see them having enough, qualifications to actually get in. Even if they do go undefeated, I think these one-loss teams obviously will get in over them. It's not unfeasible to think we could see 3 SEC teams in the playoffs if things go a certain way. So, yeah, well, it's just the way it is. So I don't think UCF deserves it. So I don't think they're getting it.
Okay, number one, if the SEC gets 3 teams in, the playoff doesn't come back next year because that's the basically the nail in the coffin for something. When you had that Bama LSU championship game, they basically spent the next few months trying to figure out what to do to prevent something that was allowed the 3rd best team in a conference to be ranked number 2 in the nation and get into the national championship game. But I do agree it's an unfortunate part of this system because when UCF schedules these teams, they scheduled Power 5 schools. Stanford has some national credibility, except for this year, which is unfortunate for them. Pitt can be a solid team. They were actually pretty decent a year ago, and it's not unfathomable that in that ACC, if they could win 8 or 9 games. And the truth of the matter is that playing 2 what are normally very good Power 5 teams is basically an SEC East schedule. It's a little bit of a light version. It's an SEC East schedule if your West counterpart is Arkansas and Ole Miss for the year or something like that. But it's not like, if you have a team, like I said, it's an unfortunate part of this system because there is absolutely no way for a school like UCF, a school like Boise State, who was UCF before UCF was UCF. There's no way for a school like that to ever do anything because they could win every game 49-0, and everyone would go, yeah, but they didn't play anybody. They'd be like, yeah, but they haven't given up a point all year. They've outscored everyone by 50 points. They've scored 600 points, and they've given up 0. And everyone's still going, yeah, but, Georgia had a really good loss to Alabama in the conference championship game, and they were only lost by 4 to Florida. And it's like, yeah, they lost twice. But this is a team and a program that has won a major bowl game, that has lost one game in the last 2.5 years. They won a major bowl game over SEC. I believe it was an SEC team or a Power 5 at the very least that first year where they went 14-0 and were named national champions by one outlet that UCF has declared. And they went 13-0 a year ago before losing in not blowout fashion, but it wasn't exactly a tight game. But, they didn't lose horribly in their bowl game a year ago to a major program. So, again, it's just one of those things. It's a terrible part of this system where you've got 128 teams or something like that that are all technically competing for a national championship, and only 50 are allowed to play for it. Because even when you go Power 5, the only shot that they realistically have is if the SEC champion Alabama goes 12-1 and no one else has less than 2 losses. The Pac-12 champion loses twice, and the Big 12 champion loses twice, and the Big 10 champion loses once. But even then, they'd probably be left out. But if you can get an Ohio State and Alabama, and there is not another team that looks obvious because the rest of the ACC is trash and the rest of the Big 10 is garbage and the Pac-12 is entirely awful and the Big 12 champion went 10-2 during the regular season, then you probably do get Alabama and either Georgia, LSU, one of those teams. And then if you don't have UCF, then you've got to scrap the whole system at that point. If you're going to let multiple multi-loss teams in over an undefeated team. But I digress. It's just a terrible part of what continues to be a terrible system. Hey, maybe California, New York, and South Carolina will actually spark something with the legislation that's already passed in California and is being voted on in New York and South Carolina to allow players to be paid. Maybe that will end up sparking something where the NCAA has to overhaul it. Who knows? I can hope anyway. Let's talk about something that's a little bit more calming. Let's talk politics. Actually, I'm going to let you guys do it. There we go. After Donald Trump fired National Security Advisor John Bolton, the third National Security Advisor of his 2+ years in office, there's now a prop bet available about which person will be fired next by the Trump administration. Betting favorites include Robert Wilkie, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, at +200, Rick Perry, the Secretary of Energy, at +400, and David Barnhart, the Secretary of the Interior, and Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, both at +500. Taylor, who do you see getting shown the door next?
This is certainly an unpredictable administration. We've seen, I think, 7 firings and 35 resignations through the first almost 3 years to this point. So, if someone's in good grace with Trump today, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll carry over until tomorrow. We could see something flare up today and someone could be fired right now. So betting on this kind of thing, I think I would just take the best value you can find. And with the odds that we have, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, and Elaine Chao, the Secretary of Transportation, are both at +1,000. The House Democrats just announced the other day they are starting an investigation into Elaine Chao for potential misdeeds and maybe misrepresenting and using her office for personal gain. I think what complicates the potential firing of her is the fact that she's married to Mitch McConnell. I don't know if Trump would fire his homeboy's wife like that from the administration. I think that's probably why she has the job to begin with. Pompeo, I think, is another decent value. He's on Trump's good side right now, it seems, but there's already some kind of talk about him potentially quitting and running for Senate next year out of Kansas. He's not dispelled the rumors, so I think that's something that has some legs to it. We've seen Trump just cut bait with pretty much everyone that started in the administration with him. So, something like this, I don't think betting +200 on a guy makes sense. I would just go for the whole thing and take the +1,000.
I wish there was an option for the field or an option for everybody. Like he just wipes out everybody and starts all over again. That's what I would bet on that. And because they don't even have that, I don't even know who half these people are, nor do I even care who half these people are. All I want to see is Donald Trump go out there and fire Antonio Brown. That's it. That's all I want to see. Until then, this prop bet does nothing for me.
NASCAR returns to Saturday night racing this weekend at Richmond. It's the second race of the Monster Energy Cup playoffs. Kyle Busch is the favorite to win the race, coming in at plus 300 odds. 3 drivers are tied right behind him at plus 550 odds. Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin, with Joey Logano rounding out the top 5 at plus 650. Rick, who do you like for Saturday's race?
Now we're talking about something that's a little more exciting, a little more, Donald Trump said, let's make America great again, but NASCAR truly makes America great again. NASCAR just really ties into the Southern roots, to the, the family, the barbecue, all that good stuff. Patriotism. Anyhow, this race is going to be exciting. It's a short track. It's one of NASCAR's oldest venues. It's one of the most beloved races. And since 1991, they've been racing. The second race has been on a Saturday night, which is this weekend. And so we're going to have some excitement. For me, I lean towards the veterans when it comes to a race like this, because the younger guys haven't been able to overcome what some of these top guys can do. So, for example, my favorite driver, Truex, won last week in Vegas, but he's never won back-to-back races in his career. So I'm removing him from this equation, and I think it really comes down to 4 guys: Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, Joey Logano. All 4 of them have won at Richmond before. Combined, they've won, I think it's 12 of 21 of the last 21 races at Richmond. These 4 drivers have won combined. Kyle Busch has 6 career victories at Richmond, which is the most among any active driver. Harvick has 3, Hamlin has 3, Logano has 2. So they all are able to, race well here. It's going to be a tough one. Like, I'm sure Taylor's going to come out and go for his boy Denny Hamlin. I think Joe Gibbs Racing is going to win this race. They won 14 of 27 races this season, which is more than half the races. Truex just won last week. Truex has 5. Busch and Hamlin each have 4 wins, and Eric Jones has 1. I am leaning towards Kyle Busch here. It's been well over 3 months since he's last won a race. He was very frustrated last week. They got caught up in some interactions with non-full-time drivers who just got called up for this race for whatever reason. He ended up finishing 19th. He went from first in the standings down to 4th. He's not in a good mood. He's going to a track he's won 6 times at, that he has the best average finish at among active drivers at 7.0. You have to lean towards Kyle Busch here. He needs a win. He's pissed off, for lack of better words. And when rowdy gets rowdy, something happens on the track, and he tends to come out on the better end of things. I'm taking Kyle Busch to win this weekend. I would not be surprised if we see Denny Hamlin win, their teammates, and I wouldn't be surprised if Logano or Harvick win. Those 4 are going to battle out for the checkered flag.
I'm taking Kyle Busch too. I think plus 300 is a decent number on the guy that's been at or near the top of the point standings like all year long. Rick laid it out. He's desperate for a win. He's kind of fallen back into the pack a little bit. He has a good track record, as we like to say. So I'll take the okay value on Busch at plus 300. I think Chase Elliott is an okay sleeper. Plus 16 to 1. That's more of just a price play, I think. But I'll side with Rick. I'll take Busch.
I'll just make it unanimous. And what are you going to say, Rick?
I was going to say his brother is 20 to 1, and he's won before at Richmond. Kyle Larson, 20 to 1. He's won at Richmond. And Clint Boyer, 22 to 1. He's won at Richmond. All 3 of them would be good value plays as well, because all 3 of them are in the playoffs. Kurt Busch and Clint Boyer are desperate. They're below the cutoff line. They have 2 races to get above the cutoff line to advance to the next round. So they got to race well this weekend. So you got your favorites, and then you got some sleepers like Taylor's mentioned, Chase Elliott and a couple other guys. Ryan Newman's my long shot pick at plus 8,000, which for the first time this year, he's not plus 10,000. And he's won before at Richmond. So you got a lot of options here, but Kyle Busch just makes the most sense right now. If you're going to put your money down, you want to go with the driver you can have the most confidence in, and you got to go rowdy.
You guys said it all. So let's move on. UFC returns to Mexico this weekend for UFC Mexico City. The co-main event features Carla Esparza against Alexa Grasso in the strawweight division. Match with the inaugural strawweight champion in UFC and an up-and-comer. Rick, you could take Esparza at plus 108 or Grasso at minus 138. Who do you like?
I'm going with Esparza. I think she has the grit and the grind to take it to Grasso this week. I know, she's basically enemy coming into, her opponent's home country, but she is a better grappler. And if she puts the pressure on and keeps the fight at a close proximity, whether it's in a clinch, whether it's against the cage or whether it's on the mat, she can grind out the win. It's a battle of two top 10 in their division, which makes it, exciting also. But I have to go with Esparza here. I think she has the experience and the toughness to handle where she's fighting at, to handle the up-and-coming prospect, and to impose her strengths in this fight.
I kind of like Grasso. She's more of a striker, and Esparza is more of a grappler. Obviously, if Esparza can take it to the ground, that's her advantage. But I kind of just like the way Grasso's skill set shapes up here. If the fight can stay on if she can keep the fight on the feet, I think she's a good value. I'll take Grasso at minus 138.
I'm going to just side with Taylor on this one. I'm going up and comer. I'm going to go with Grasso on it. I think that she's going to pick up the win in it. Being able to fight in your home country can go one of two ways. We've seen pay-per-views and shows that are just start to finish examples of the pressure that comes with fighting in your home country. Particularly, there was one in Brazil a couple months ago. And then you have the opposite where you go to Shenzhen, China, and you have a new women's champion in front of her home country because Weili just showed up and showed off and just crushed it in the first round. And Rick called that. So I'm going to go with Grasso on this one. It's a tight fight as far as the odds go. Not as tight as the headline bout, though, because that one pits Yair Rodriguez against Jeremy Stephens in the men's featherweight division. Taylor, this money line can only be described as airtight. Rodriguez is the slightest of favorites at minus 118. Stephens is a minus 112 underdog. Which fighter gets the win in Mexico City?
Yeah, there's not a lot of room for profit on this one, but I think Rodriguez has the slight advantage. Stephens is kind of a power guy. They're both strikers, but I think Rodriguez is quick enough to possibly kind of just tire him out by moving around enough. Rodriguez obviously also has the home ring advantage here in Mexico City. I think the crowd will be behind him. That could sway the judges. You never know. So toss up, I'll take Rodriguez.
I'm all in on Rodriguez for this one. I don't feel Stephens is, where his ranking has him. I think he's below, actually. I think he's actually a little bit overvalued here also. I think Rodriguez is not getting enough credit. I said in my preview, I think this is going to be an exciting card because a lot of the fighters aren't, known by casual or mainstream fans. So they're going to put on some, exciting action inside the octagon. But the one fighter that could come out of this whole thing looking like your next big name is Rodriguez. He has the technical skills to outstrike and outbox Stephens. Stephens has the heavier hands, and that's what Rodriguez has to watch out for. But Rodriguez is a better grappler. He's more athletic. He's younger. He has some impressive wins. Stephens, to me, is more he was battle-tested, but he's suffered a lot of losses. He's not – I don't think he's trending upwards, as the kids like to say these days. I think more than anything, he's a gatekeeper. He's a stepping stone for a guy like Rodriguez to get a big top 10 win and then shoot himself up the rankings more. I'm all in on Rodriguez this week, and I think the value is incredible, especially in the main event fight and the guy fighting in his home country. I mean, come on. You have to go Rodriguez here.
I'm going to make that one unanimous. I'm just going to take this opportunity to point out to Taylor that I believe it would be referred to as home octagon or home cage advantage instead of home ring advantage. So if you'd like to apologize to the masses, I'll give you this opportunity.
Same S, different pile.
Oh, jeez.
And on that note, that's going to do it for this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Make sure to check out gamblingsites.org, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check back next week for another edition of the podcast. They've been Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. I'm Drew Goldfarb. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.